Thank you for joining. My name is Ypatios Moysiadis. I'm the Business Development Director and UK Country Manager. Today we are going to present about the current state of the Polish Renewable Energy Market and where we see things going within the next few years. We will take you through a very quick presentation on Greensolver, and then Mrs. Kat Siadak will start straight away with her presentation. We intend the webinar to be about an hour long, so we will have the presentation, and then at the end we will try to answer as many questions as possible from all of you. So without further ado, Kat, if you can share the presentation and get things going. Greensolver is an asset manager, technical advisor, and construction management company. We are operating globally, but we have 6 offices around Europe at the moment, in Paris, London, Netherlands, in Groningen, Athens, Madrid, and Dublin. And we're currently expanding our offering and establishing more teams in Portugal and also in Poland. Kat is obviously a Polish national. She will be leading our expansion to Poland, which is a great and exciting market. And I will straight away leave Kat to go through it. For more information, you can visit our websites, and also you can engage with us directly by communicating if you have any further information on what we do and who we are. Kat, go ahead, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to start by looking at the current capacity of renewable energy sources in Poland. So the graph you're seeing, that's renewable energy sources. The top line provides you a total of capacity installed by the end of 2019. That was 9.4 gigawatts. And when you look at the development over the last 10 years, you can see that there are 2 distinct features of RES in Poland. The first one is that wind dominates, and it's all onshore wind in Poland at this stage, although we'll talk about the offshore. There's a huge potential for offshore wind, but at this point it's all onshore wind. And onshore wind was basically responsible for the growth of renewable energy sources in Poland between 2010 and 2016. As you can see, those 2 lines will go head and head. There was no other basically renewables at that time. What happened, and when you can see that the growth of wind stopped in 2016, what happened then is that the legislation regarding wind farm zoning was changed, and the government started requiring that the wind farm is located far away from residential areas, and the distance was set at 10 times the height of a turbine, and that's from ground to the highest point, including the blade. That basically prevented new development of onshore wind projects. Having said that, though, there's still lots of onshore wind projects with permits that were granted before May 2016, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. The government is currently talking with the industry, and they're thinking of changing those rules. The industry wants to go back to the rules that were in place before 2016, which was the zoning was based on acoustic studies or noise studies. So that's how you determine how far from the residential area the wind farm should be located. And so hopefully we will have changes in the legislation, and according to the recent announcement, we should see a movement here around January 2021 with the new legislation being introduced. Until that time, new developments are not possible, but as I said, the market is saturated still with projects that received permits before 2016. This second distinct feature on this graph is the fact that over the last few years, technology that experienced the most rapid growth is solar PV. If you look at this graph, the solar is virtually non-existent in Poland until 2017, and since that time has experienced rapid growth. Only between 2018 and 2019, we saw a 1 gigawatt growth, and by Q2 2020, we were at 2.5 gigawatts. So the growth has been really rapid, and the key driver behind this growth have been auctions, contract for difference auctions. Just going back to this graph, so as you can see, like there's very little diversity in terms of other sources. So when it's slightly growing now, there was about 53 megawatts added in 2019, and we're hoping with the changes of legislation, it will pick up again, and plus all the other projects that on auctions will be developed. Solar is growing rapidly, but anything else, basically, there's no movement over the last few years. So while this graph is telling us what is, the second graph is telling us of hopefully what will be. So these are the plans for the future. Poland, obviously being part of the EU, is trying to align its national policy and national targets with the EU targets, because we're obviously bound by the EU law. And the current National Energy and Climate Plan is that 15% of energy will be from RES sources by the end of this year. It does not seem like we'll be able to accomplish it, but the European Commission will extend probably by about 12 months the date. We are hoping to achieve the 17.6 by 2025, and then 21% by 2030. And when the Polish government announced its plans for years 2020-2040 in terms of energy sourcing, we can see that the focus here, what they'll be focusing to achieve those goals, will be solar PV and offshore wind. So solar PV it is predicted that it will be growing very rapidly, probably about 5 gigawatts every 5 years. Well, as you can see, it doubles, and by 2030, we're going to have 10 gigawatts, and it's going to double again to over 20 gigawatts by 2040. The second source of resources that the government is hoping will allow them to achieve EU targets is offshore wind. There have been some developments there because, as I mentioned before, right now Poland does not have any offshore wind, but there's a lot of hope in the market despite the lack of offshore wind experience currently. Poland is set to become one of the biggest centers for the offshore wind, with 10 gigawatts to be delivered over the next 2 decades. And the government earlier this year announced the draft of the Offshore Wind Act, which would start contracts for differences which will award contracts for differences for offshore wind projects. There will be 2 phases. So phase 1, the government will select projects that are most advanced, and they will set a strike price at which those projects will be granted governmental support. The second phase will be between 2023 and 2028, and these will be 3 competitive auctions, at least 3 competitive auctions. The support will be granted for 25 years, and it's only last week that the draft was amended, and actually the first stage where the government will select projects that will be granted governmental support. They increase the capacity of those projects from 4.6 gigawatts to 5.9, and that will be delivered by 2022. So that's between 2020 and 2022, 5.9 gigawatts of offshore wind will be awarded contracts for differences. Current growth. So as we saw on the first graph, current growth of renewable energy sources in Poland is basically onshore wind right now and solar PV, and that's thanks to the key driver for it were renewable auctions. The system was introduced, the legislation was introduced in 2016. Auctions are scheduled to be held at least once a year. Original plan was that the auctions would be between mid-2016 and they would end in June 2021. So that's the current legislation. However, the government has announced recently that they are planning to extend these auctions because we do need more renewable energy sources to meet the targets. And those auctions will be extended until 2026. So the official announcement is supposed to come at some point later this year. So if it does, we'll update you as soon as it does. But it does seem like the auctions will be extended. The auctions are CFD type of support. A bidder with the lowest price wins, and the government covers the balance between the market price and the auction price. There are technology baskets, and solar is with the wind in the same basket. And there are two categories for projects under 1 megawatt and above 1 megawatt. As I mentioned, the auctions are to be held at least once a year. The president of the Energy Regulatory Office has to announce it at least 30 days before the actual auction, which is held on an online platform. The next auction is scheduled for later this year. We're expecting that 1.6 gigawatts of capacity will be awarded during this auction, but we don't know any further details because, again, that's being announced at the same time as the auction time is announced. It's important to mention here that those projects that win auctions, they first of all they have to have bank guarantees when they're submitting application. Those bank guarantees have to be from a Polish bank or international bank with a branch in Poland. And there are certain obligations on projects that win. Well, there's several of them, but the key ones are connection dates. So depending on the technology, the project will have to be connected within a specific amount of time. For solar PV, that's 24 months. Onshore wind, 33 months. That was actually recently extended because those were a little bit tighter, but it's 24 months now for solar and 33 months for onshore wind. And those projects will also have to generate at least 85% of capacity that they offered in a bid. And that will be verified for every 3-year period. In terms of a coming 2020 auction, so we expect it to be in Q4. The reference prices were announced already. They're in the table, as you can see. And if we look at the prices from 2020 versus 2019 reference pricing, they're not significantly lower, which is a good sign. And looking a little bit closer at 2019 auction, so those were held at the end of November and then beginning of December last year, and onshore wind was the cheapest again. The lowest auction price was 162.8 zloty per megawatt hour, and the maximum was 233 zloty per megawatt hour. About 800 megawatts of solar was contracted. Those projects were of no larger than 1 megawatt, with prices ranging from 269 to 327 zloty per megawatt hour. So you can see that this solar is competing with wind on price, so that's the differences. However, the new feature last year was that photovoltaic farms larger than 1 megawatt appears for the first time, and about 40 megawatts of large scale was awarded at the price of 233 zloty per megawatt hour. The next slide is giving us a little bit more information, a little bit look at like what happened over the last 4 years since the auctions were introduced. And as we can see, onshore wind has been a clear winner at nearly 3.5 gigawatt of onshore wind was awarded, majority of it last year and then the year before. That means that, and the second one is solar PV. Basically, no other renewable technology has benefited from the auctions. In terms of the projects that won last year in 2018 auctions, majority of them have not been yet connected, which if we summarize everything that we discussed so far, if we look at the potential investment, if we look at the short term, onshore wind and solar definite winners. For onshore wind, there is at least 160 projects to be delivered as a result of just the last 2 auctions. That's about 2.5 gigawatts, and 5.5 gigawatts to be delivered from the last 4 years of auctions. For solar PV, mainly small projects, as we saw, because of the way the auctions are structured. We mainly deal with 1 megawatt solar projects in Poland at this stage, and that this year the delivery of small projects, and then it's predicted between 21 and 22 utility scale will dominate. Then in medium to long term, again solar, it seems like the government is set on increasing RES capacity in Poland, mainly through solar, which is great news. And National Plan for Energy and Climate states that approximately 8 gigawatts of solar will be reached by 2030, additional ones. But the industry is predicting that this target will actually be reached by 2025. And offshore wind, as I said, with new contracts for differences that the Parliament's actually just discussing, because as I said, the draft legislation was amended last week, and then it will be in the Parliament, I think, as of yesterday. So hopefully we'll have a new legislation with regards to an offshore wind that will help the offshore wind to take off in Poland. Another investment opportunity in Poland are corporate PPAs. So the market at this point is liberal. It's not heavily regulated at all. And there are several types of PPAs allowed in the Polish market. On-site, which installation is on the side of on the premise. Near-site direct wire, where the installation is close to the premise, but far enough that the transmission wire directly from the installation to the site has to be run. And the off-site, which is a synthetic one, when the installation is connected to the distribution network or the grid. It's important to mention with the near-site direct wire. For that one, for direct wire, you require a permission from the president of an energy regulatory office to run that, and they're quite hesitant to grant that. The preference is for sites to be connected to distribution networks. Obviously, the transmission charges can be charged then, but it's also about access. Third parties, so that is slightly problematic. But the market has been identified, and there are options. There's lots of options for corporate PPAs. There were several deals have already happened earlier this year, particularly on the wind side, and Greensolver actually capable of identifying suitable PPAs we've experienced in this sector. So please contact us outside of the scope of this webinar if you would like to talk a little bit more with us about that. So as I was just saying, we've already seen a few corporate PPAs happening over the last year. So we have 15 megawatt wind site from WPDAG, with Orange, which is one of the major mobile companies, one of the main mobile companies in Poland. We have Mercedes-Benz with VSB Energia, and Energy Poland signing a corporate PPA again went with one of the breweries in Poland. It's good to look at the obviously interesting bits now the energy prices in Poland when we're talking about corporate PPAs. This graph is giving us information on the monthly weighted average prices from a day-ahead market. And this is the information published by the Polish Power Exchange. As we saw, there was a bit of a COVID drop earlier this year, as everybody experienced, but the prices are picking up. They've already reached 220 zloty per megawatt hour. And because of the energy mix, the European Commission is expecting that the energy pricing in Poland will actually be higher than average. They're predicting actually that it will be 350, I think above 350 zloty per megawatt hour by 2025, which makes corporate PPAs even more attractive. Particularly when we compare it to the pricing at which auctions are won, with, for wind being lower than what we can see in the market. For wind projects, for onshore wind, we're waiting for a new legislation. So I'm just going to say a few words here about the solar projects. When you run a high-level investigation in terms of land, when you're trying to determine whether to build a solar farm on a particular land, there are a few things to look at, and one of them obviously will be whether there is any site of ecological significance around, what the types of soils are, distant to connection points, so standard things. But you also want to, in Poland, the characteristic is you want to have a look whether there's a local spatial development plan for the land. If there is, then you should check whether building a solar farm on that land is permitted. Securing a land is relatively standard. It's however, while securing the land, you may also apply to the authorities for environmental permit. That actually will be a determination whether you need environmental study. The key here is the application that has to be filled out, but the quality of the application actually is very important, and it can help a lot in preventing lengthy and expensive environmental study. So you want to have a look. You don't need to have a land secured to apply for this, and barely any cost. It's under £25. Going back to the local spatial development plan, so that's under planning permit. And once you determine whether there is a development plan, and you should see whether you're allowed to build solar farm on the land. If there is no plan, however, you can apply to the local authorities to create a plan. It might be a slightly lengthy process, and it's a two-step process because you probably will have to apply first for local authorities to budget for creating a development plan. You can also petition for the plans to be changed. So it's all really possible, but just might be a slightly longer process. So the easiest, obviously, the fastest would be if you have a land that's got a spatial development plan and allows construction of a solar farm there. On the grid offer, you have to request that grid connection conditions are issued to you. Once the application is submitted, you have to have, there is a regulation that the response has to be issued within 150 days. Once you get an offer, it's valid for 2 years. And as it is in the UK, RES have preference on the grid. The DNO or the grid will be determining whether they have technical capabilities and the network is in areas is good enough to be able to connect you. However, if they say no, they have to provide you with the minimum capacity that you can connect at this time, and also provide you with the plans and schedule with the plans for network reinforcement that will allow you to connect and what the date would be. a somewhat distinct feature in comparison, definitely, to the UK market, is a requirement to have a concession, which is a type of a license that you have to obtain from the Energy Regulatory Office. The license itself does not cost that much, 616 zloty, but and projects under 5 megawatts don't have to pay the ongoing annual fee. Just a few words about the in-house. That there's what we can see here are 4 biggest, and then there's one RWE in the middle. It's the 5th one. So in total, in Poland, over 300 organizations actually have a license for distributing electricity. Some of them are major manufacturing plants, but for majority of household and non-household consumers, electricity is delivered by 5 major DNOs, and that's what's illustrated here. And with that would conclude my part of the presentation at this point. And Ypatios will have a few words now about cost reduction.
Thank you, Kat. Very interesting presentation. We have already some questions that we're going to answer at the end. I will not keep you very long. Essentially, what I would like to do here is have a look at some very interesting points on cost reduction. Kat, if you could go to the next page, please. And I would give you our opinion on how these are related to the developments on the Polish market. So this is a graph from REN, and it clearly shows how the prices have come down per technology. The biggest drop, as you can see, is on the PV side. It's on the light yellow graph, which has come down significantly, the cost of kilowatt hour produced. But we have a continuous trend that we look at this stage. 6 months ago, we were discussing with various manufacturers on panel prices, on a container-based panel price at around 20 to 23 euro cents. And now we are at below 20, with panel prices expected to come down even further. So this downward trend, we expect this downward trend to continue. And it's an interesting mix that we see. If you can go to the next slide, please. And this is actually the percentage, which is massive. So we definitely see the reduction of the development of the cost and the integration of storage, and also the advantages that we have on an efficiency of the panels, and also the nominal capacity of the panels will create further dynamics in the market. It is extremely interesting. I think within 10 years, solar PV is the same level as onshore wind, and we have a lot of discussions in future auctions. We have that in Poland. We might have that situation in Greece, which we've touched in previous webinars, that the auctions will be technology agnostic and will allow generators to compete with whatever they think is the best solution, the best projects that they can put forward. The very last slide that I have for you is this, and we have also a question about the recent changes in government, which I will let Kat answer. But what we see is that, especially when we have governments that they are a bit more conservative, that they have a strong, or countries that they have a strong presence with generation from fossil fuels, there is a strong resistance from shutting down and diversifying that generation mix. However, with the cost coming down and with the cost of emissions being at where they are, we expect to see revised plans in many situations, in many cases. A lot of these coal-based power plants will not be able to be financed in the future. Obviously, I think we have that sort of ban in the, at least for 12 months now, if not more, that new coal-fired plants cannot get any sort of financing. Major institutions around Europe and around the world. So at some point within the decade or up to 2050, these plants will have to be decommissioned. And the only thing that can supplement that loss of generation is very quickly is the deployment of renewable energy in combination with storage. Storage could be chemical storage with batteries or other forms of storage with pump hydro or even new stuff that we see with utilization of gravity. So we expect things to change. We expect things to become even on more conservative and less favorable current legislations. We expect to see a revision, combining this with a Green Deal plan of EU and the money that the EU is planning to invest also as a bounce back from COVID-19 financial crisis. The green investment is there. And it was very interesting for me participating in a webinar very recently where we had some major institutional investors and pension funds actually mentioning that they lack projects to invest. So there is appetite, there is capital out there, but there is not enough bankable projects that people could go and invest. So that creates, say, a situation where it's a seller's market. So early stage development is becoming a major process within a lot of infrastructure funds. We see that with our clients, and we have clients that previously were engaging on ready-to-build stage, but now they're willing to risk development finance and also get involved much earlier in the state because now we have simply more educated investors and we know how things work. And looking at the LCOE of renewables, we can compete even without subsidies. So I will leave it there, and we would be happy to have some of your questions. I already have 3 here, which we will try to answer to the best of our knowledge. And the first one is from Simon Robinson. Simon asking us, what do we think is the impact of recent election results on renewable development in Poland? So, Kat, what would be your non-political opinion on that?
Well, basically, no impact whatsoever in the sense of changing of policy. So we can see that because with the current president staying in the office, it solidifies the ruling party holding power, and their plan is actually to promote solar, to promote offshore wind, and they're working on changing the legislation around onshore wind. So I think that currently the presentation there when I was researching and preparing, I was all based on the current state, and I think that will remain in place because with the new president, the plans of the governing party are becoming even more likely to be developed and come implemented. So I think that.
Do you think they will take any sort of actions to allow for a better utilization and deployment of corporate PPAs?
Corporate, I mean, the market is there, right? I mean, it's liberal, it's not heavily regulated, but there is no regulation. So there's no regulation helping it, but there's also no regulation preventing it from happening. And as you can see with the energy pricing being favorable, we already have major players in the market starting to look at it and starting to sign corporate PPAs in Poland. So yeah.
So from a newcomer point of view, and then I'm taking this sort of opportunity to make some questions myself because you've been researching on this and you will be leading it through Greensolver's point of view and through our team. what would you consider right now the biggest, if you would like, long-term threat on development? Is it a specific technology? Is it something else? Is it lack of clarity in a specific issue within the legislation?
I think you have to be very particular, very focused, and very thorough on your due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the key. There's no, I mean, I don't think it's risky, any more risky than any other European countries, and it's renewables dependent on the weather. But I don't think that there's any bigger risk than investing in other countries. The permitting process, the permissions are a little bit more convoluted, and there's more steps, for example, than there are in the UK. So investors located mainly in the UK, there will be whole different experience of due diligence. So it's important to work with somebody who is experienced in it, who knows Polish market. But other than that, you have a 15-year guarantees for projects that won auctions. So I don't think that this is particularly risky.
Comparison to other markets.
Exactly.
I will let you pick the next question then to answer.
So the next question I will have, what's the likelihood of the 2016 wind permitting restriction being revised and the timing? Would the governments actually officially announce that they will be changing the restrictions? And they are holding conversation with the wind industry about what exactly should be changed. And they've just announced that the new legislation will be coming in January 2021. So it may change, but it seems like there is movement, and it seems like the government currently has picked up the RES agenda, and they believe that it can serve as strength for the economy, job creator. So they are actively looking into it, and it looks hopeful. It looks good. It is looking good. It is looking good. In the meantime, as I said, there's 3.5 gigawatts of projects that still need to be delivered on the wind side, on the onshore wind, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be clear on what the regulations about wind permitting will be going forward. So hopefully things will change in this front a little bit.
Excellent. Next one.
Where do you see unlevered IRRs for CFD projects in the Polish market?
I think we would see same as I mean, it depends really on the cost of the project, on the development cost and the connection cost and everything else. But if we could give some sort of an indication, I think it would be in the same levels as in other European markets. We would see low double digits or high single digits returns paid, depending on the project and depending on the profile of the project. Obviously, the smaller the project, we would expect not to have economies of scale, so we would expect lower IRRs. The larger the project, we would expect to see slightly higher IRRs. Another one, are you expecting an increase in average project size, wind projects average size of CFD projects currently quite small?
So again, depends whether it's an onshore wind or an offshore wind. I don't know what you mean. They're quite small. The CFD average size CFD projects currently quite small. So right now we don't. I mean, on an offshore wind, they're expecting about 10 gigawatts of offshore wind projects, 5.9 in the next year and a half, really, to be awarded CFDs. None of them have been awarded CFDs yet, and that legislation, as I said, is due later this year. On the wind side, it's hard to say because exactly we're still waiting. We're still waiting to hear on the amendment of the existing legislation on the permitting. When that happens, that should not those they should have the size of the project. There shouldn't be any smaller than any average size average projects in other markets.
Do we have any restrictions on the grid that we have any issues on specific areas, perhaps?
So there were restrictions in another part of Poland. So that was identified by the government as preventing the development of onshore wind, and so that was being addressed to allow for the development over the next decade, the capacity that the government is planning. So yes, major in the north, but that's being
so do your due diligence properly and start from the grid.
Yes.
And the land as in every other development situation. Do you see any?
Yes, the local development plan, local spatial development plan. That's really important about availability. Because the reason why this is particularly important is that if you are purchasing sites that won auctions, you will have certain obligations to the government to deliver on that. You will have to, so the bank guarantees submitted will be lost if you don't deliver. You can face financial penalties if you don't deliver, if you won't be able to connect on time, because it will appear that certain permits are not in place and will take you longer. So it's really, really, can't stress enough how important it is to have all of the permits and all of the permitting thoroughly revised.
And wearing my selling hat, I can say that we can deliver all of these pre-development due diligence services. That
definitely, we can be
your local partner.
Definitely.
What is the appetite on community renewable project? Is there any development on the legislation there? Do we have any sort of structure on the community renewable energy projects?
Not much happening in that department. Definitely in terms of the governmental regulations of how that should be structured, or actually it's not being promoted by the government at this point. So the community development is not. There's lots of individual consumers. There's lots of people installing solar on their rooftops, but like in terms of community projects, not so much. No.
We also have a question on chat from Paolo Barabucci. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your surname. Paolo, could you please better argue on the trend of the onshore wind? I think we had a very interesting discussion yesterday when we were going through the material cut. And so what is your take on the onshore wind? What is the current situation? And then we can give an opinion of what do we expect as Greensolver.
So again, going back, there's still 3.5 gigawatts of wind projects to be delivered, to be connected. So and over 5 gigawatts operational projects. So if you're looking to invest in operational projects, there's over 5 gigawatts of that available, and 3.5 that will be delivered over the next couple of years. So there will be growth in onshore wind, and whether it will be limited in comparison to solar and offshore. Well, again, we'll see later this year when the new legislation is announced. But it seems like it will, if the government is actually going to introduce the law as being currently discussed and delivers it by next year, we can look at a boom in the onshore wind again in Poland.
So we are hopeful. We are hopeful that will not be limited. Yes. And going back to my point that if we see the combination and the development of the energy mix and the requirements, the target requirements or the targets set by the European Union to its individual member state, and I think doing a bit of research, Poland has about 48 48 coal-fired plants. As I said in my slides, a lot of these will have to be decommissioned. So you cannot exclude onshore wind from the energy mix moving forward, because solar and onshore wind are the most immediately deployable generating technologies. So even if you have some sort of current limitations in the legislation, as Kat said, we expect the legislation to be revised, and we expect onshore wind to continue playing a significant role within the Polish market. I cannot see any other questions. It's almost 10:02, so I would say that we could close this webinar here. I would like to thank Kat for your presentation, your research, and your contribution. To everyone participating, thank you for taking the time this morning to be with us. We hope that you've got some good information and an overall good presentation for the Polish market. As I mentioned in the beginning, Greensolver is present, and we would be happy to have a discussion offline with anyone who is interested in the Polish market, going from the pre-development stage all the way to M&A and transactions on operational assets, both on wind and solar. So thank you very much for participating. Thank you, Kat, and looking forward to speak with all on offline. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. As Ypatios said, due diligence particularly important.
Particularly important.
Yes, and do contact us if you have questions. And as I said, really help. We can really help on the corporate PPA. So do get in touch if you're interested in entering Polish market, or
Great.
you're already there and you want to help. All right, great. Well, thank you everyone.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.